podcast. Welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm going to tell the story of the first time hitchhiking where I thought that I was going to die. I actually thought that I'd been picked up by someone who was going to murder me. And you get told stories like that from hitchhiking, people getting murdered, people getting this or that, organs harvested, whatever. But I actually thought that it had happened to me, and so it's that story. It was one of the first trips I did leading up to the big hitchhiking adventure. So to build up to the big 2-year trip, I went on 5 smaller trips, each one getting longer and further away from home. First one was Scotland, 2 days. Then it was Luxembourg from the UK, 4 days. And this one was the third one. It was the south of France by myself. It was the first one by myself. And it took 6 days. So I'll come on to that in a minute. But first, just some more updates. So this is still one of the pre-recorded episodes before the baby comes. So by the time you hear this, I'm probably well in the thick of it, sleep deprived, covered in all sorts of baby fluids, and absolutely loving it at the same time. So before that happens, I suppose I just want to share how it feels to be imminently becoming a dad. And there was an interview with Oscar Goodman a few weeks ago on becoming a dad, but it's changed a lot recently in my head. It's now becoming a real thing rather than an abstract concept that's upcoming. So it now has become completely clear that life is going to change forever. It's no longer going to be just me and just Emma. It's going to be another person in the house. And it's funny because in the past, when people have stayed in the house, we've been sick of them after 3 days. The rule is culturally you should spend 2 nights, 3 days at someone's house and not any more than that, because then you start overstaying your welcome, and the people you're with want to get on with their lives. They've got stuff to do. They've got laundry, they've got tasks, they just want time to themselves, and it's really odd knowing that this person's going to be living in the house and they're not going to go away for about 18 years. And I know it's going to be different. I know it's not going to be like that, but that's all I have to compare it to at the moment. So that's one of the weird thoughts that's been going around my head. Very worried about the birth. The birth's this thing that you can't plan. It could happen today. It could happen before midday today. Or it could happen in 4 weeks' time. I just don't know. She's 38 weeks pregnant now. And that's the thing, normally you're given a very narrow deadline. You're given 3 to 5 working days, or you're given by this time on this day, like the 30th of the month. But never have I had a deadline of something happening that's so vague. And I'd like to think that we can tell when it's going to happen. That last week Emma was cramping a lot. A bit of mucus came out, and apparently that's a sign that it's incoming. But that wasn't it. It's just gone now. She's not going into labour, and we thought she was. And you can't plan your life around it. No, you have to plan your life around it. You can't make plans where you're away for too long, or you can't go too far away from the nearest hospital. And with me picking up work as a self-employed man, it's difficult because, yes, I still have to bring an income in, 2 incomes now, really, because Emma's on maternity leave, and she's self-employed, so she really doesn't get much money for it. But while I pick up work, I have to let people know, yeah, I'll pick up work, but at any point I could have to leave. So that's difficult for me because I don't like letting people down. And at the same time, I know it's going to be one of the best things that's happened to me, this child coming along. And it's just very exciting, really. There's all these issues, I suppose, but ultimately it is extremely exciting. And I suppose that's the main thing, really. So with that, I'll get on to telling the story of when I thought I was going to get murdered. So started off from Lancashire. I was working at PGL at the time, and I'd booked a week off work to go and hitchhike. It was the most I could get off work. So couldn't convince anyone to come with me. This was a solo trip, and I thought it's kind of good. It's good to do one of these trips by myself, because the main trip is probably going to be by myself. At the time of doing this trip, I thought I had a partner with me, but he bailed at the last minute. So I'm quite glad about that now, but at the time I was quite worried. I was thinking, how can I do this by myself? But I can't imagine it being any other way now. I can't imagine having done that with another person. I don't think the growth would have been the same, personally. So it was good that this trip was alone. Started off, just walked out down the country roads, put my thumb out occasionally, and no one picked me up, but that was fine. I was just walking outside. It's my favourite thing to do, really. That's why I do it as a job, I suppose. And eventually I did get picked up. I got taken south by about an hour towards the motorway. When I got to the motorway, I made a very big mistake. I walked along to the entrance of the motorway, and if you're not a driver, which I wasn't at the time, I didn't really understand the map or the signs. You know how the motorway signs can sometimes say a place that you're heading towards, but actually it's not heading towards there really, it's heading in that direction, but you have to head that way. You have to go that way to get somewhere completely different. It was that sort of situation. So read the road sign wrong, really. Well, I read it right, but I didn't really read it right, and ended up picking up a lift going north the complete wrong way for about 45 minutes, because this is the thing as well on the British motorways. If you get onto it, you sometimes can't get off for a very long time. You'll notice if you've taken a wrong turn on the motorway, if you've come off at the wrong point, you sometimes have to travel all the way down this really long road for like 20 minutes. And it's annoying because every minute the wrong way is a minute added onto your time, because you've got to come back that way. So that's really what happened. It was about a 45-minute wasted journey. And when I got out the car on this wasted journey, I was completely fine. I wasn't annoyed or anything. I just found it quite funny. And the lady, I didn't let the lady know that she'd taken me the wrong way, because she would have felt terrible and she probably would have offered to take me back, but I didn't want to do that. So anyway, luckily it was a service station that had a bridge going over the motorway, so I could walk across to the other side. And I managed to catch a lift very quickly back to where I'd started. So that was fun. And it started to rain at that point. Got picked up a bit more and travelled a bit further down south, and that was it. And then at that point it was just a case of, I've got to set my little tent up, get comfortable for the night, and just ride out the rain, really, because I didn't want to try and hitchhike in the rain, because I would have been standing still. It would have been getting colder and colder for me, and I didn't really have a good way of drying myself. I had a small towel, but you know, I just didn't want to give myself hypothermia. So yeah, slept the night, woke up the next day, had a bit more luck, made it towards London from the north of England. So that was a lot of progress in one day. And I wasted a lot of time here. A couple of points really where I wasted a lot of time. There was one point where I was standing on an A road hitchhiking, and what I'd learned about hitchhiking was you've got to give the driver two things, which is enough time to think about picking you up, to notice you, and then to think about stopping. And then you also have to give them a good place to stop once they've made that decision. And so many times along the way that wasn't possible on the big trip, and I saw people put the brakes on a little bit or go to stop, and then there just wasn't enough time. And so it just wasn't always possible, but when it is, most of the time it is. When it is possible, you have to do that. And one of the ways I did that was I stood on the slip road coming off of the A road, not thinking at all that these people weren't going to continue down the A road. I just thought this is a really good place to stop, which it was, but no one was going to pick me up. I had the sign up saying Dover, I think it was. I was trying to get to the ferry port, sign up for Dover. I stood there for about 2 hours trying to catch a ride. And looking back, I know now that none of those people were going on the A road. None of them were going to Dover. They were all going home. They were coming off the A road. So eventually a taxi driver stopped. He pulled in and he just asked me, "Are you a hitchhiker?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "None of these people are going to be taking you to Dover. You need to stand over there on the entrance to the A road." And when he said it, it was so obvious. Anyway, did what he said, picked up and taken to Birmingham, second biggest city of the UK. And I had no plan at this point. I had no real end point. I just wanted to hitchhike as far away as I could in the time that I had, which was a week. And if I could get to somewhere really, really far away for very little money, then I would. And so I thought, why not try Birmingham Airport? I'd heard stories about people finding really, really cheap last minute flights for £1, 50p, whatever. It turns out that airlines don't do that anymore. But I didn't know that at the time, so managed to hitch a lift to Birmingham Airport, or towards there, and I ended up walking most of the way. Walked into departures and just went up to a couple of the desks and I said, "What's the cheapest flight you can give me outside of the UK?" And all the flights that they showed me were just full price, and some of them were actually increased prices because it was last minute. And he just said to me that the airlines don't like people doing this anymore. They want you to book in advance so that they know what the demand is ahead of time, which made sense to me, really. So I just walked out. I just thought, no, thanks very much, but I'm just going to continue south, try and get to a ferry, really, try and get towards Europe and then carry on from there. Try and get some truck drivers, maybe. Truck drivers always take you very far. And outside Birmingham Airport, it was a real problem getting picked up because there wasn't really anywhere for people to stop. There was a tiny little SOS spot for a car to just about get into if they had to. But there was no real hard shoulder, there was no big lay-by that I'm used to. If someone wanted to stop, they had to see me coming and not really think about it and stop, because it was quite close to me as well. So thankfully someone did stop. It was a taxi driver. He'd done a lot of hitchhiking himself, and he said to me, as soon as I saw you, I just thought, oh my God, I've got to stop, I've got to pick this guy up. So thankfully there was a guy who just gave no hesitation to it whatsoever, because a lot of people, including myself, when they see a hitchhiker, because they are about now and again, I think, oh, should I stop? Anyway, he took me most of the way down south, and then I made it to a place called New Haven, and it was quite a nice day, because I was basically walking around. I was seeing road signs for places where I'd grown up, partly. I've grown up in dozens and dozens of places, and I saw the signs of some of them, and I hadn't been down there since leaving there, so that was quite nice, seeing that, and got some food and headed to New Haven Ferry and took the ferry across to Dieppe in France. And then once I was in France, it was day 3 at this point, waking up. I woke up very early, and it was quite easy to get rides in France, so made it around Paris quite quickly. And then at that point I was on the French motorway system, and I just got into trucks, basically. I was looking for truck drivers because I thought they can take me really, really far. So by day 5, I'd made it pretty much to the south of France. I was in that region, and at this point I had to book a bus home for day 7 or 6. Ended up booking a bus home for the evening of day 6 to get back home on day 7 and just decompress and unpack and get my washing done. So I had to make a decision where to head now. And there were 2 cities I was very close to. There was Marseille, or Marseille, depending how you want to pronounce it, and Montpellier, both south of France cities. And for some reason I went with Marseille. And in that final service station, guess where every driver was going? It wasn't Marseille, it was Montpellier. every 10 minutes someone was pulling over saying, I can take you to Montpellier, I can take you to Montpellier, including an attractive woman on her own who just wanted, who looked like she wanted to pick me up, and, you know. But yeah, I just thought I've got to ride it out now. I've already booked the ticket. It was about £30, which at the time that was a lot of money, especially to someone saving a lot of money. But eventually someone did pick me up. He walked back from the service station shops, and as soon as I saw him coming out, I thought, oh, that's a dodgy guy. Yeah, but he walked up to me and he said, oh, I'll take you to Marseille. And I thought, I don't know about you. You're a dodgy guy, but being British, I said, okay, let's go. I didn't want to be rude. It's really interesting that I did that I decided to get into someone's car that I didn't want to get into. Because it happened another time on the main trip in Russia. I got into someone's car and I didn't trust them, but I did it anyway. When I thought ahead of time what I would do if I didn't trust someone, I was thinking I'd just say no, thank you, and then carry on. But it's really interesting because quite rarely do you actually do in a situation what you think you would do. And it's really easy for that reason to judge other people. You'd say this person's done this thing, or they've acted a certain way, and you would say, oh, I'd never do that. Of course I would confront this person or say this or say that. But the truth is you probably wouldn't. You'd probably do something very similar to the person that you're criticizing. And so that's really interesting. That's one of the things I've learned on the road is what I think I would do in a situation and what I actually do are sometimes quite different things. And so when I see someone acting not as I think I would act, I tend to have a lot more sympathy now. So anyway, I got into his car and I just had a bad feeling. So but he'd said he'd take me to Marseille and he was definitely going in that direction. And I was planning it in my head. I thought, what would I do if he takes me the wrong way? What if he carries on driving when I tell him to stop or pull over? And I thought, just grab the wheel, that's fine. Steer out the way, crash the car, of course. And so reassured myself with that, I suppose. So we were driving along and he told me, you look rich, like you've got to be careful in Marseille because people might try and steal from you. They might try and mug you. And I thought, what a weird thing to say to someone you just picked up. And because I already had reservations about him, I thought he was threatening me, that he was going to steal from me. He was going to chuck me out the car and drive off with the backpack or something. And anyway, all these thoughts were going around my head. So we came up to Marseille and it was a massive city. He was telling me that it was basically an African city. It wasn't really a French city, and he was right. It was a port city. It was one of the main connections between France and Africa. So culturally, it was very much closer to Africa than France. So I felt very out of place because I'm not French, but France is quite similar to the UK in culture. I know a lot of French and English people wouldn't agree, but compared to the rest of the world, it is quite similar. It's almost the same place. So we got there and I just felt like I wasn't at home anymore. And I felt very much more on edge. And so I said to him, look, can you just let me out here? And he said, oh, no, I'll take you down the road. I'll take you down here. It's fine. And so I thought, okay, has he kidnapped me now? Is this it? And then I said, no, please just let me out here. Look, pull over here. It's absolutely fine. And he was like, no, there's a good spot down here. And I was thinking, do I grab the wheel? Is this it? And I thought, no, of course I'm not going to grab the wheel. Like, who does that? It's not a film. It's not some TV drama. I'm just going to have to sit here and just watch the situation, really. So again, I did not act how I thought I would act. And finally, I just had to be assertive. I had to say, look, you need to drop me off here. I'm going to walk. I don't want to be in this car anymore. And at that point he did. He stopped, he pulled over and let me go. And he said, do you want to get a picture? And I thought, yeah, I'm going to get a picture because then he can get out the car first. So I said, okay, yeah, let's get out the car then. And he did get out first, and I thought, if I get out first, he's going to drive away with my luggage. He probably wouldn't have done. He probably was absolutely fine. He was probably no ill intention towards me at all, but I'd gotten quite paranoid and quite worried. I'd worked myself up, I suppose. So we got out the car and took a picture together, and it was a nice little moment, really. I thought, maybe I've misread this guy. And that was it, and then he drove off, and I had my backpack, and that was it. And I just thought, where was this kidnapping from? How have I thought that this was going to happen? But I think it was just, I misread who he was. You know how some people just don't seem that trustworthy, some people seem quite dodgy, as you say, and we like to think that we can see that kind of person so we can't get taken advantage of, but the truth is that that kind of person tends not to look any different from how you would say a normal person looks. We like to think that if there's a serial killer among us, we'd be able to tell, we could see, but you can't tell when someone's going to be a narcissist or when they're going to be a bad person normally. Sometimes you can, sometimes it's quite visible, but a lot of the time it's not. And I thought that this guy was a bad person. He was actually quite nice. He took me to Marseille, he took me right to the beach, and that was it. And I set my little bivvy bag up on the rocks that evening, and I went into panic mode a little bit because he told me all these things about people they're gonna mug you, and you know, you look not rich, but you look like you've got stuff in your bag. You know, you've got white skin, blonde hair, that kind of thing. I had blonde hair at the time, more blonde than I do now, and yeah, so I just sort of power walked. I was trying to get out of the city, and yeah, I just hid among all these big rocks on the beach basically, and just put my sleeping bag out, bivvy bag in, and that was it, and that was the night. So next day, had a good sleep surprisingly, and just walked along to the mountains that separate Spain and France, and I thought, this is a good place to end. So that was it, walked back to the bus port, got the bus back, and that was it. And I'd done a 6-day solo trip by myself, so I was much more ready now to do the big trip. So the next trip, there was one more big trip to Morocco and Spain, and that was about a month, but that's another story for another time. So thanks for listening again, and I'll see you next week.